When I was growing up, comics felt larger than life. Every page was packed with dramatic poses, impossible action, bold colors, and larger than life heroes. Reading a comic didn't just tell you a story, it made you feel like you were witnessing mythology unfold. So when comic book games started appearing on consoles, I didn't just want to play as Spider-Man, I wanted to feel like I was playing through the comic itself. And I think one game understood that better than almost any other: Spider-Man and Venom in Maximum Carnage. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know I'm a huge Marvel fan. Lately, I've been spending some time on Marvel's Cosmic Invasion, and I've been having an absolute blast. Tribute Games clearly understands what makes classic Marvel games so much fun. But while I was playing it, I thought about how it was missing one thing another Marvel game did so well. One that approached comic books in a way I wish more developers would do. Because I don't think Maximum Carnage is just a great Spider-Man game, I think it's a blueprint for how side-scrolling Marvel games should adapt comic books. Most side-scrolling Marvel games borrow the characters. Maximum Carnage borrowed the language of the comics. Games like X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, Marvel's War of the Gems, and even Marvel's The Punisher all featured fantastic comic-inspired artwork. Usually, though, you get a single splash image, scrolling text, and then the game would begin. Maximum Carnage went much further. Comic pages, panels, speech bubbles, sound effects. It didn't feel like the game was simply explaining the story. It felt like the comic had come alive. As a kid, that blew me away. If you already read the comic, it felt like stepping back into one of Marvel's biggest events. And if you hadn't, the game introduced you to a story in a way that made you curious to discover the comic afterward. To me, that's what every great adaptation should do. The best Marvel games don't replace the comics, they make you want to read them. Another game that captured this feeling surprisingly well was Marvel Heroes on the PC. Its comic-styled cutscenes were fully voiced, making it feel like the pages themselves had come to life. I'd love to see more developers embrace that style again. Also, a commenter on my channel reminded me of Ultimate Spider-Man, which did the same style of storytelling. And although I wasn't a big fan of the Ultimate series, they did a great job with the comic-style storytelling. Oh, and thank you for that, by the way. Looking like a comic is only half the battle, it also has to feel like one. Maximum Carnage absolutely delivered. Playing as Spider-Man and Venom felt completely different from one another. You're constantly climbing walls, swinging through levels, battling waves of enemies, hitting them with the kachaks, and taking on some of Spider-Man's most iconic villains. Then there were the hero call-ins, to which the game featured quite a few. You got Black Cat, Cloak, Dagger, Morbius, Firestar, Captain America, Iron Fist, and Deathlock. They weren't just some cool assists. They reminded you that Spider-Man existed in a much larger Marvel universe. And that's something I think modern Marvel games should explore even more. One of the things I loved about Marvel's Cosmic Invasion is how Tribute Games embraces Marvel's incredible roster of heroes. It captures the energy of Marvel team-ups so well. Imagine taking that same approach and applying it to Marvel's biggest comic storylines: Avengers Disassembled, Civil War, House of M. Instead of simply referencing those stories, let us play through them. Not just as Spider-Man, let us experience them through multiple heroes, each bringing their own abilities and perspective to the story. I think that would be incredible. Whether intentional or not, Maximum Carnage soundtrack took inspiration from bands like Pantera and Ozzy Osbourne. It was fitting though, as it wasn't just background music, it complements the comic's personality. At the time, Marvel comics were getting edgier and intense. Reading Maximum Carnage felt like it moved comics from PG-13 to 18A. Even now, hearing the tracks from this game instantly takes me back to reading comics as a kid, when it felt like looking at something edgy and cool. And that's the power of great game music. It doesn't just support the experience, it becomes part of the memory. Marvel has over 60 years of incredible stories that introduced unforgettable heroes, legendary villains, and some of the greatest crossover events created. Maximum Carnage reminded me that games don't have to simply borrow those characters. They can use the storytelling, the artwork, the pacing, the emotion, The feeling of turning another page because you can't wait to see what happens next. That's why I still think Maximum Carnage matters today. Not because it's nostalgic, but because it reminds us of what comic book games can become. Games don't just let us play as our favorite heroes. They make us want to open up a comic book when we're finished playing. And if more developers continue looking into the comics themselves, not just for characters, but for inspiration, I think the future of side-scrolling Marvel games is incredibly exciting because the best adaptations don't replace the stories we love. They invite us to experience them in a whole new way. And honestly, I hope that's exactly what the next generation of side-scrolling Marvel games does. Thanks for watching.